We start tonight with tragic news. Another attack on the U.S. Capitol, this one by a single suspect in a car. Yet again, an officer protecting the Capitol is dead. Billy Evans served on the U.S. Capitol Police Force for 18 years. National Guard troops at the Capitol went into immediate response. This as the barriers put up after January 6th had been coming down. Joining us tonight are four reporters tracking everything unfolding this week. Wesley Lowery, correspondent for 60 Minutes Plus. Jonathan Martin, national political correspondent for the New York Times. Anna Palmer, founder of Punchbowl News, a political newsletter and co-host of the Daily Punch podcast. And Ayesha Rascoe, White House correspondent for NPR. Anna, let's start with today. This is fresh news. We don't know much yet about what happened, but what do we know?
What we know is, as you said, an officer, Billy Evans, 18 years on the force, is dead. A man coming into contact with the barricade and at the Capitol, and really just devastation right now. I think what you and I are feeling as reporters who are often on Capitol Hill is just another attack on the U.S. Capitol Police, which is devastated right now, having very, very low morale. They've already lost multiple members of the U.S. Capitol Police Force this year alone. And it would just felt like the building itself was getting back to normal a little bit after the January 6th insurrection. You know, there had been massive fences and different layers that had really built this fortress around the Capitol that had just started in the last week or so to being taken down. You know, the reporters, everybody kind of back in the building, feeling like it was maybe a little bit more business as usual. But clearly, the U.S. Capitol is a target, and that's something that we're going to have to face. And certainly, members of Congress and the defenses of this Capitol are going to have to be fortified at this point.
Jonathan Martin, you and I know that building so well. All of us do. You know, we were able to start parking up there again. I want to ask you, what does your reporting tell you, and what does your gut tell you about whether this incident will change anything, either security or maybe even mindset for all those politicians at the Capitol?
Yeah. I think you touched on both elements, Lisa. There's a sense that our government is under siege, our democracy is under siege, both physically in terms of the security of the Capitol building itself, the seat of American democracy, but also something deeper and more profound that there's almost a fraying of American democracy, the kind of polarization ever since last year's election, and then obviously in the aftermath, has really frayed and almost put American democracy on the brink. And you see the sort of widening gap between the two parties. And Lisa, there's almost a mistrust that borders on suspicion and almost contempt now between members of Congress of different parties. So this is a difficult moment, not only in Washington. I think this is a difficult moment in American life on a lot of levels.
Wes, to you, on the police, I know you've covered policing for many years. First of all, what do you think tonight means for police in America and Capitol Police? And what about this fraying of America?
Well, my fellow panelists made great points. As Anna said, this is, again, devastating for the Capitol Police, who have been through a ton as a police force so far this year. You have to remember, not just the officers who lost their lives during the insurrection, but the many who were injured, some still recovering, and then the mental and emotional health, the psychological health, trauma that comes from the Capitol building coming under siege this way. And here now we have another instance of the Capitol coming under attack. I will note that the police response today was much more standard and was what it often would look like. It's not that the Capitol at times has not had other people break barriers, has not had other potential attacks, but they're typically on a much smaller scale like this, and the response typically looks much more like this than it did necessarily on January 6th, where you saw the building overrun, police outnumbered, and less kind of obvious protocol of what to do. And so certainly the Capitol Police today are frustrated, are concerned, are mourning the loss of one of their own officers and the injury of others. But this, again, speaks to, as J. Mart was noting, the precarity of our nation, of our politics, and that this isn't a big game. When people actually see each other as enemies, when the infighting and intensity becomes so serious, when the stakes are pushed so high, where you have political actors of all types of different ideological stripes arguing that democracy itself or the legitimacy of the country itself is at stake with every single vote or every single culture war, you end up with people who take those things seriously and then begin taking things into their own hands.
Right.
Ayesha, this idea of America attacking itself has landed in President Biden's lap. Also, he's a Capitol Hill guy, right? Like that's really sort of like his heart for Washington. How's the president responding to this?
Well, he obviously sent out his condolences to the families that lost of the police officer who died. But this is once again, it almost had already become a cultural war, this idea of whether to keep up the fence around Congress. It had already become very political. You have people on the right saying, oh, now everything is a fortress. Why do we have all these gates up? Why do we have a fence up? We should have a fence at the border. That's where it should be, not around you're already hearing that sort of talk. I would think that maybe this will bring a seriousness back to these discussions about security because, January 6th, yes, that's over, but the threats still remain. And that there does need to be a real serious conversation about how do you fortify the people's house? How do you make sure that people are able to get in and see Congress at work, but also remain safe? And I think that's the real question going forward.